rights and multi-stakeholderism. These two topics are a little bit, seems these two topics are not relevant, but I believe that this is, you can understand after this session that this will be interrelated. So I invite Kelvin Wong to be the head table from ICANN. So he's an expert of multi-stakeholderism. Yeah, no. So this will be a discussion kind of panel. So you can join in any language because there are a lot of people. So use both because we have Dominic Bellone in the panel. Okay, so it's better to get introduced. I believe Dominic will start the introduction himself to the.
Do you have my presentation? While we get my presentation ready here. I'm sorry?
Self-introduction.
Thank you. My name is Dominic Bellone. I work for Counterpart International, which is a nonprofit development organization. We've been around for more than 50 years. We actually started in the region, and we do a lot of traditional development work around the globe, mostly in the global south. And what I'm doing here is hoping to launch a pilot project around internet governance and internet freedom. So I'm here to talk a little bit about that and the intersection, of course, of online rights, technology, and the internet. So that's a little bit about me. I used to work at Freedom House. I've spent several years also in the democracy and governance development field. Before that, I was a television news producer.
Thank you. And we have another foreign delegate here. So I'll ask Kelvin again, please do a self-introduction.
Hi, everyone. This is Kelvin Wong from ICANN, Internet Corporation for Sign Names and Numbers. Sorry, I was in the washroom. So just a little bit more about myself. I think some of you have heard me say this. I recognize you from yesterday and day before yesterday as well, but I'll repeat that for the sake of those who don't know me. So I'm based in Singapore, the APAC hub. We have a hub in Singapore from ICANN, and that's where we have operations looking into Asia-Pacific matters. As for myself, just a little bit more, previous to this posting, this job, I was with the Singapore government. I worked briefly in the Ministry of Information, Communication and the Arts on digital broadcasting issues and media regulations. And then I was in the Ministry of Finance looking into budget control. And then I was in the Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth. So after that, I moved on to ICANN, looking into youth engagement and outreach. So I'm pretty familiar with some of these guys because we have been interacting for a while. I hope to share a bit about multi-stakeholder model today. But as the title goes, it's actually, I was talking to some of the panelists, it's actually digital rights and multi-stakeholderism in Sri Lanka. So as far as the topic is concerned, I'm very much a student here. So I hope to contribute where I can and learn from the rest as well. Thank you.
And Mr. Jayantha Fernando is a well-known legal professional in the ICT field. So, but I beg a pardon, and I'll ask you to please self-introduce to the audience. That's enough. Okay. and we have Dr. Rasika Dayarthane with us. So please be kind enough to introduce yourself to the audience.
Rasika Dayarthane, and I'm a lecturer at the University of Colombo School of Computing. And I'm
Okay. So as Professor Rohan Samarajiva introduced himself in the earlier session, so I'll move into the Mr. Rohan Udalagama of Lanka.com, CEO Lanka.com. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So we'll directly move into the session. So digital rights is a space that where all the people are interested, and I believe that Dominic will help us in defining what digital rights is. Digital rights.
Well, first, before I get to that question, I'd just like to thank the organizers here a bit, starting with the president of the ISOC chapter, Sagarika, Madam President, and Chairman Mahi. Thank you very, very much for what you've done here. It takes a lot of work to do what you've done here. I know it's volunteer work, and you often don't get thanked for what you do. So thank you very much for what you're doing. And I was very impressed to hear about the work your chapter is doing with differently abled women. And so I can't thank you enough. And it's this kind of work that's going to keep the internet open and accessible and free for Sri Lankans. So thank you. I don't really have my presentation up here, but I think I use terms such as digital rights and online rights a little bit differently, because for digital rights, I think of it more as technology and what are the rights and responsibilities that have to do with your personal technology, like your mobile phone, or how you access certain applications or websites online. Personal security, personal data. I think safety was the term that was discussed by Champika in the previous panel. Online rights, I think, more tied to policy and more towards human rights. If we could skip down, I think I had a certain sequential order, but I'll move a little bit. We're gonna have to go a bit further. Next. Okay, why not, if you insist. Sure. I'll skip over the multi-stakeholderism part, since it seems like that's been covered by others. But one of the issues dealing with online rights and digital rights is that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the UN back in 1948, has a particular article, Article 19 here, and I'll just quickly read it. It says, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. Now, that was in 1948, so then the question becomes, how do we contextualize these rights in an internet and globally connected society, in a digital society where boundaries don't really exist and we have a transnational platform? Well, I think there's a really interesting and useful quote that comes from a former UN official. And it's from Frank LaRue. He is a former UN Special Rapporteur of freedom of expression and freedom of opinion. And what he says is that the same rights that people have offline must also be protected online. So I don't think we can or should really make a distinction between the rights that you enjoy offline and the rights that you enjoy online. Now, like Kelvin said, I'm a student here, and I don't presume to speak to the Sri Lankan experience and legal context per se. I'll leave that to others. I'll just say that I think there definitely needs to be no barrier between the online and offline world. And the UN reaffirmed that principle last year in another declaration. And some key highlights, there was a resolution passed last year, and I'll just go through quickly some of the major points of it so we can get a sense of what the United Nations says about the internet and online rights. So that's the internet must be part of a comprehensive human rights approach when states are making policies around human rights. Governments are encouraged to engage civil society in a multi-stakeholder fashion to craft policy. Gender inequality online must be addressed and prioritized. Internet shutdowns are unequivocally condemned. This came up in a panel discussion a couple days ago. This next point is particularly controversial. It says national security is no justification for violating human rights online. And that's a philosophical debate that's going to go on for a while. How do you balance the needs of protecting a society while allowing certain rights to flourish? And there is a balance, and every country is trying to get it right. And also access to the disabled. Internet access to the disabled must be provided and prioritized. That is a human right as well. And then finally, I threw in a few other issues that come up a lot in international discussions of online rights around the internet, and that's of course freedom of expression online, access to information online, privacy in communications and personal data. Generally speaking, content should not be blocked or filtered without due legal process and transparent procedures, and access and online protection for women, religious, ethnic minorities, LGBT community, differently abled, rural, and poor communities. There's obviously nuances and different local and legal contexts for every country as to how some of these rights are interpreted and implemented, but I believe that every state has a duty to pay some respect when it comes to implementing policies online and how they impact rights. So I'll leave it there and let the other panelists provide their valuable input and wisdom as well, and then we can take the conversation further.
Let's move into the vision of Sri Lankan way of defining the rights, digital rights. I believe the good speaker on that will be Professor Rohan Samarajiva. Please take the floor, sir.
මට සිංහලෙන් කතා කරන්න අවසර දුන්නා මේගොල්ලෝ. ඉතින් මම සිංහලෙන් කතා කරන්න. නැත්නම් ඉංග්‍රීසියෙන් කතා කරන්න. Your choice. Okay. I'll try to see whether I can do it in both. So the basic, if you're talking about digital rights, I would say that there are many things you can say, and you can have debates about the validity, the utility of a rights framework. Because one of my questions is that in areas where we don't have rights, we actually have got greater coverage. than in the areas where there are explicit rights. But leave that aside. This is the foundation. If you're not connected to broadband, what are we talking about? So Sri Lanka's situation is actually quite pathetic. 22% broadband penetration last year by the TRC data. This should be much higher for a country of our economic standing and literacy and so on and so forth. But this is where we are, and there must be some good reasons for that, which we can discuss if necessary. The red line, of course, is mobile. So that one is usually one person uses that. The blue line is fixed. So it tends to be a household or a larger unit. So you could say, even though this, I've just added it up and divided by population to get 22%, you could say, maybe it's about 30%, right? You also think about what people are spending. So in the old days, we used to think about access in terms of knowledge, right to read newspapers and things of that nature. You can see that, oops, I thought I had deleted the middle lines. Anyway, we spend only 0.15% of a household's income on books, newspapers, and magazines. Extraordinarily small. So basically the print side is dying, right? On the other hand, we spend about 2.15% on telecom and internet. So that is 885 rupees per family, per household of about 4.5 people. So that's relatively high, and this is old data, the most recent available, 2012-13. So if you're looking at the next HIS, which should be out shortly, it should be, I guess, about 1,000, right? So you can see that clearly it's shifting to the electronic side. This is a survey, a representative sample survey done in the Western province of Sri Lanka, which is, you could say, the most advanced province with 30% of the population and 42% of the economy. And it found that private television is the most popular source of news, followed by Facebook and the internet in general. Now, the interesting point is that for the 18 to 24 group, which is the future, Facebook is number one, which means as they grow, Facebook, they will carry these habits with them. And as the country develops, the rest of the country will become like the Western province. So you can imagine a situation where, in fact, our primary source of news will become Facebook. But of course, you must understand that Facebook doesn't generate any news of its own. So it's various kinds of other news that gets linked through Facebook. So it's not like other people are going to die. So there is this question that I would say, if that is the most fundamental thing for digital rights, which is access, can you use, right? Now, our neighboring country has got a state called Kashmir, and they have been without internet for a long time. I can't remember how long, but that picture, no internet connection, comes from Kashmir, right? And the other one is a country called Cameroon, which is on the other side of Africa, on the western side of Africa. And they were without the internet for 94 days, but it was only the English-speaking side of Cameroon. So there's an English-speaking side and a French-speaking side. The English-speaking side didn't have the internet, right? Now, we can all very easily talk about these things and say, those are far away, foreign, strange, exotic countries. These things don't happen to us. Now, this is a screenshot of an article that I published in 2011, soon after the Arab Spring. And I talked about something called Gyanendra's law. Gyanendra's law is that if you are at a certain level of internet connectivity or mobile connectivity, if you're above a certain level, if you cut off the internet or cut off the mobile networks, you will cease to be in power. Now, I hope you know who Gyanendra is. King Gyanendra is no longer in power. Nepal is a republic, and he cut off everything. I mean, we are not talking about the internet. He cut off everything. Mobile networks, everything was cut off, and several years later, he ceased to be king. So then there is the Tanchwe exception to the Gyanendra's law, which is that Myanmar also cut off the internet during that period. But at that point, Myanmar had almost no internet. So as the exception is that if you're really low, it doesn't matter, you will not be toppled. And then there is the Rajapaksa exception, which is that if you cut off internet for short periods in only some parts of the country, you will still survive. So we cut off internet and mobile connectivity in Jaffna and the eastern province at various points, but for short periods and only limited areas. So then you will also survive. So then my law has generally withstood the test of time. Mr. Hosni Mubarak cut off the internet, and you know where he ended up, right? He's no longer the president of Egypt. Mr. Gaddafi cut off the internet, and so on, right? So the idea is that if you have a high level of connectivity, then people get completely pissed off and you cease to be in power. So if the best safeguard, I think, against people cutting off the internet is to have a lot of internet, right? Right. So that is, in my opinion, the most basic of digital rights. And if we are interested in digital rights, we should have some safeguards. And again, I just want to emphasize, this is not a third world or developing country problem. Mr. David Cameron wanted to cut off the internet and shut down networks. That is in the sort of whatever birthplace or democracy or something in the United Kingdom. In California, in the heart of the IT country, BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit, wanted to cut off the internet, right? To prevent some people organizing. So this is a disease that gets to everybody. So I think we should have some rules that apply to all governments. I mean, these people didn't do it for long periods of time, but you know, this is not a developing country problem. This is a politician's problem, right? Multi-stakeholderism, I'm going to, so I mean, you could talk more about digital rights. Now, I, for one, don't believe there was a proposal that in our current constitution, there should be a right to internet. And I said that is completely wrong and inappropriate. And we should not have right to internet in the constitution. So I'm saying that just to provoke you. If you want to ask me why I said that, I will be happy to answer. Multi-stakeholderism. Now, this is a very, very slippery concept. But I will do this in one slide, which is, I think you can read it. This is basically a screenshot of my website from 2012, where Mr. Amadou Toure of the ITU says that he consulted all the stakeholders and he came up with some really bad proposals about charging for, charging some really weird proposal for charging for data use on the internet. So that would be that if I pull down a YouTube video from, let's say, a site in Taiwan or someplace, the Taiwan operator would have to pay the Sri Lankan operator some money. My action, right? I pulled it down, but the data is coming from there. Therefore, that fellow would have to be paid. That old telecom interconnection, international interconnection or termination rate regime to be transposed on the internet. So we defeated this. This came from these people, but I would say we defeated it because I spent a lot of time fighting this horrible proposal. And in the IGF, we took a very strong position on this. And we went to African countries, and I wasn't physically present in Dubai, but I did some interviews outside the conference area, and we actually prevented this proposal even from coming to the floor. So what I say here, if you see that, it says that, you see, if you have these other voices that are not represented in the ITU model, because ITU likes to pride itself saying it is a multi-stakeholder model, that, even if my organization wants to become a sector member or something, I can pay them some money and become a member. But in actual fact, in ITU, they only listen to certain kinds of voices. So in my opinion, that is not a good model, and we need something else. Whether IGF is the model, I'm not saying anything about. I'm saying it's something else that we need rather than the ITU model. So we know what non-multi-stakeholderism is. We know why it's wrong. We don't know the proper dimensions of the new model that should be available, because there is a question of legitimacy of all these speakers. The people who manage to pay the airfare and come to meetings tend to have a larger voice than the people who don't. So then one asks the question, what is the basis of that legitimacy? Thank you.
In the remote, we have Shreedeep from Nepal who going to be connected, and his voice raised from Nepal, where internet shutdown is frequently happening, as he says.
Hello? Can you hear me? Hello? 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 Yeah. Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Okay.
Hello, Nepal.
Talking about internet shutdown in Nepal, it has been quite frequent. If you look at the whole activity of internet shutdowns in Nepal, then the policies are not that feasible in terms of digital rights. It is more like the regulators, they have the full capacity of ruling in. So as Rohan mentioned, that we did have a shutdown during the king's monarch takeover, and prior to that also we have been frequently having a few of the shutdowns. And one of that which I would like to recall is in 2011 we had a shutdown done by the internet ISPs. The local ISPs had done a shutdown. That was done because the ISPs were charged with VoIP, as then the VoIP was illegal. The VoIP was illegal, and ISPs were charged and were jailed for VoIP cases. And Access Now had launched a campaign, Internet Showdown in Nepal. So we collected a lot of signatures, and we collaborated, and we were in process of submitting the signatures, but it so happened that the ISPAN, the association, went into talks with the government, and the process failed. So the thing about digital rights is basically I strongly believe that it should be wholly governed in terms of the core values, digital core values of internet, and it should not be subjected to moreover like like traditional values, because internet itself is changing. So it needs to be open in terms of having the voices of all the stakeholders. Yes, more research, more surveys, which I think is hugely lacking in Asia Pacific. In Asia Pacific practice, we do not have research and surveys that are happening. We do not follow reports. So So these kind of minor things make huge difference, because the government itself is more focused towards acting as a regulator rather than playing the facilitator role. So there is a lack of opinion as well as option in terms of what the voices of people are. So these kind of open forum, the multi-stakeholder process drives the voices of people in a more collaborative way, making it to a point of creating a better option in terms of giving better policies. And as said, we need to have open standards. We need to collaborate, because today, whether you talk about Nepal, whether you talk about Sri Lanka, whether you talk about Bangladesh, we are using Apple, we are using all the devices. And when we look at our rights and our policies, they're like old. They do not even have an equal value. So internet core values itself grants us that equality in terms of whether we are from Nepal or whether we are from Sri Lanka or whether we are from India. It's equal. So I think the multi-stakeholder process drives it, and more research and survey needs to be done. Thank you.
Get the perspective of legal perspective of Mr. Jayantha Fernando on. Okay, on. So then I'll move to Dr. Rasika Dayarthane regarding the rights.
So first I would like to discuss common citizens' right or fundamental rights, because in Sri Lanka, when I am doing lectures at the university, first question I ask is that what are our rights? And unfortunately, most of the students don't know their rights. They don't know their rights, and they don't know how to find their rights also. So I think this kind of internet, these forums and the internet should be used to educate the citizens' rights. So this is I think this is a big problem, because some people, they know, some students answer the question, they tell only freedom of expression. That's all they know. So I think this internet should be used to educate the citizens' rights. So that is my first thing I am taking this one. And the second one is I'm talking about the digital rights. So digital rights, if you take the digital rights, so one of the rights that we don't have is right to privacy. So that is lacking in Sri Lanka, and it is very important right. And when it basically in the internet, not only the internet but in a general life also, the privacy right should be recognized, and unfortunately it is not recognized as a fundamental rights in Sri Lanka. So the privacy rights is not only like the protecting your rights, your personal information. It is much broader than that. Actually, if you take that privacy rights, it is you have a right to ask the data controllers. The data controllers are the people who collect your data, and ask the data rights what are the data available at their places. And if the data is not correct, and you have a right to correct this information, and you have the right to ask them not to process your data. So this is a privacy right is a very broad one. And then you can also demand that the protection of your data. So this right is not here. And I think that these kind of forums should be used to ask the government and all the policymakers to recognize it as a fundamental right. And probably that is in the new constitution, but I have not seen that one. So another thing is that when you are talking about these rights, there are several new rights. For example, right to be forgotten. And that is a right is recognized in European countries and European Parliament, European Court of Justice. But we are not aware of that right. So that is the basically that right says that if certain informations are available online, and you have a right to ask them not to give that information when someone is searching your information online. So that is the right to be forgotten. And naturally, this was happening in Spain. And then there was a person called Gonzalez, that's a name, and he had a bank loan. He defaulted the loan, and this was published in the newspaper, and in a very local newspaper, and several, I think, very long time ago. And after 15 years also, when he searched his name, he found that information, because he defaulted once he defaulted the loan, then that was published in the newspaper, and his property was to be taken and to be auctioned. So that was published in the newspaper. So later, when he searched that his name, he found that information, and he asked this newspaper to remove that one, and newspaper said that we have already published it, so there's no point. They couldn't remove it. Then they asked Google, the search engine, to remove it, and Google refused it. And then he went to courts, and Spain court, and then he went up to the European courts, and then recognized it is a fundamental right, and they asked Google to remove that information from the Google search engine. Not the search engine, but when if you search that within the European region, you will not get that information. So then Google had to redesign their algorithms also. And now these European people, they have the right to ask not to publish certain things, information, or if they are published, not to get into the search engine results. And so we are not aware of this kind of things. And also people are discussing about this right to be forgiven. Also, that is another right. And so if someone has done something, and why can't you forgive that? So these are the things that people are discussing in European countries. And I want to mention that another thing, there's internet rights and the right to get the internet. And Professor Samarajiva said that it's not recognized on the new constitution or something. But one thing is that other countries, they are demanding that everyone should be able to get the certain amount of the data, the bandwidth, at an affordable cost. And it should be available to everyone. And now in Sri Lanka, you said that it is 22%. It should not be 22%, but everyone should get it. And then that is why these other various countries, they are empowering these local libraries with the internet access. So you don't have internet, and you don't have computers, but whatever other devices, but you can go to a public library and get the internet access. But unfortunately, I don't see that happening in Sri Lanka. I don't know whether it's, but I cannot see that. So these are the things that we have to work on. And apart from that, the rights are not like we should not get blind or taken for granted, but the rights are also depend on the culture. And in Sri Lankan culture, and we haven't done any studies, but probably we need a different kind of rights in the internet. But we have not started that discussion. So that is, I think it is a good thing to ask the people that what kind of rights do you want to have, rather than taking the rights and putting it into the Sri Lankan legislations. Why can't we ask that these are the things that we want to have in Sri Lanka? And probably that other people also later buy those things. So these are the few points I would like to mention here. And also I want to mention that the thing is, the rights are not a very isolated thing, but you have to talk about the rights with the duties. So if some people have to exercise their rights, other people have to fulfill their duties. And so what are our duties on the internet? And that is also something that we have to discuss here. So I'll stop at this point.
As he speaks, the right to access is so at the moment we do have to provide in Sri Lanka. So I believe as a internet service provider, from the perspective of internet service provider, Rohan Udalagama will, Mr. Rohan Udalagama will state on that a little bit further with the developments and what are the things going on.
although Professor said only 22% of the population has the internet access, I believe the actual number is a bit more.
I said 30.
Yeah, okay. But I think it might be even higher than 30, because I think today most of the main constraint is the cost of the equipment. If you want to have fixed broadband, you need to have a laptop or something like that. Most people cannot afford it. But the whole paradigm is shifting, with a lot of people now accessing the internet on mobile. And mobile phones are quite cheap. I think you get for about 7,000-8,000, you get a reasonably functional phone. And now with new applications coming like Pick Me Up, I see a lot of people, like even trishaw drivers, are actually accessing the internet. I mean, they are not accessing internet in terms of accessing, but they're using various applications. So if you look at, I think today, most of the trishaw drivers even use the Google Maps to search a place and other things. So I think if you really look at, although the statistics may say 30%, actually the number of users may be much higher than that. The factor that is positive in Sri Lanka is the data usage is among the cheapest in the world. Which is very good, because even Indian people come. Normally in India, everything is very cheap. When Indians come to Sri Lanka, they are shocked that our data rates are about 1/3 or half their rate. Most of the guys are quite shocked. So I think these are good trends, which we must actually make. And I think this is a part of the thing. The competition is very high in Sri Lanka, particularly in the mobile sector. 5 mobile operators, they each one trying to cut each other. So the cost of access is going down. Cost of phones are going down. So I think there will be a huge generation who will access the internet on mobile. Of course, the access on broadband in terms of fixed broadband definitely is not going to go up, because the cost is high. And there is an infrastructural problem, because if you take even in this room, very few people will have a fixed line at home. Or even in the workplace, of course, there will be fixed line. But in homes, very few people have, because the cost is high. And actually, it is not functional anymore, because whatever you do on the fixed line, you can do on a mobile. And with the cost of tabs and phones coming down, I think there is no real need for people to have a fixed broadband connection at home. So I think these are the few factors that I think positive on our side. Negative, of course, still people complain that the speed is low. I can remember some time ago, about 2 years back, we were in Singapore, and even people from SLT, we were all there, and we were very proudly saying, in Sri Lanka, we have mobile broadband all over the country. We can get even 1 or 2 M download. Then some of the people in Singapore laughed and said, "What nonsense is this? We are getting 100 MB to the house." Right? Then later we asked the people in Singapore, "Look, I mean, you are getting 100 MB. What do you do with this?" Then they said, "Oh, we are viewing HD TV." And then they themselves said, to really enjoy HD TV, you must have at least a 15 screen. And to watch a 15 screen, you will have to be about 20-30 feet away from the screen. And they said, actually, the homes in Singapore don't have such facility. So sometimes what happened is, technology is there, facilities there, but you really can't enjoy the facilities. So I think we have to be realistic and look at what is practical and useful, rather than going to all these very extreme situations, because it may not be of any practical value. In Sri Lanka, what I notice is, even people who don't know English, because the problem with internet is the good content is in English. I see a lot of people on Facebook who don't know English at all, but they are managing to communicate. They are putting a lot of information. They are communicating with people. So I think this is a good trend. Only thing that is bad is, I think we need some mechanism to make available the valuable content which is currently in English in local languages, so that people like farmers, other workers can use this information to better their lives. I think that's about it. Thank you.
Then we are going to the next panelist, Mr. Jayantha Fernando.
Can I be heard on this?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's nice to be in a very large audience, and this is one of the least prepared events that I came for, and I'm delighted to see the fantastic organizational effort on the part of ISOC. Had I known we're putting so much of effort, I would have got a little bit more ready. But I think my congrats to Sagarika, and the entire ISOC LK team for putting together such a unique event. And I'm really proud of the fact to note how ISOC LK has evolved over the years to such high level of maturity, reaching a broad range of our population, including university kids and school children as well. So that's a positive trend, and I congratulate all of you for this initiative. Now, I was actually trying to gather some thoughts as the other speakers spoke, and I agree with everything that has been said before me a short while ago. I was trying to figure out in my mind as I was driving here this evening through all the floods and in the rain, what digital rights mean to me. So, I mean, Rasika mentioned that in university, many people don't know what their rights are. We as children or young adults or university students or young professionals or older professionals have different perspectives as to what we think our rights are. And I was trying to see what these rights would mean to me in the context of the new trend in digitization we see happening even in our country. So I just had just a few rights which I thought were priorities for me. Maybe I'm looking at it from my own perspective. Forgive me for that narrow perspective. But to me, digital rights means rights associated with access. And Rohit very clearly brought out this point about the competitive environment we have in the telecommunications sector. Sri Lanka, by the way, for those of you who are new, was the first in South Asia to liberalize the telecommunication sector in such an efficient manner. And we have in our panel one of the most distinguished and one of the best known regulators of our time in South Asia, Professor Rohan Samarajiva, who gave leadership to some of the reforms and the benefits we are enjoying in this country. So competition is there, and as Rohit pointed out, as there's so much of usage, mobile data, mobile applications, and as a result, we see more demand by consumers, groups, requiring even the state to respond. Very often governments are slow to respond to these demands. And in recent times, we see this Wi-Fi program, some of it has been a success, some of it has been a failure. Maybe Rohit can explain the pluses and minuses of that and how effective that can be made to spread access rights. But that also leads me to connectivity speeds. But as Rohit pointed out, we have to be realistic of what we are going to do with high-speed broadband. Sri Lankan telecom providers have done marvelously in comparison to other regional countries to give fairly good rates. And as was pointed out, we have one of the best data rates in the region. But we also need to be aware of the need to be represented effectively. And the right of representation is an important point I was looking at in the context of digital rights. And on that note, I just want to emphasize for those of you who are relatively new to this subject that the LK registry was the first country code registry to obtain delegation for multilingual country code domains so that you can have your internet addresses not only in English but corresponding .lanka and ilanke. And I think somebody may have made a point of that earlier in the day. So that effectively provides the right of representation, which is important for digital rights, in my opinion. The third right I was thinking about is about the right to engage in commerce and trade using the digital media. And in that context, Sri Lanka has made advancements. We have a technology neutral electronic transactions law, electronic commerce law. But what is important is not just that law. Sri Lanka was the first in South Asia, the only country after Singapore, overtaking Australia and China, to ratify the UN Electronic Communications Convention so that SMEs can adopt electronic commerce contractual frameworks that will be recognized in other state parties which are party to the Electronic Communications Convention. So Australia later this year will be coming on board to the convention. China is on its way. Next year, first quarter, they have already set their timeline. Their Communist Party has taken a decision about it. So trading with Alibaba on an equitable basis, or even having a Alibaba platform in Sri Lanka and using that as a platform to communicate with other countries effectively, or engage in electronic contracts with other state parties, will be effectively carried out because we are a state party to an international norm in relation to electronic commerce and electronic trade. And on that subject, we also have a positive development in terms of payment options that are available, ability to make payments online, which is also an important right if you want to do trade and commerce and complete that cycle electronically without having to make a manual payment. So on that note, Sri Lanka has a Payment and Settlement Systems Act of 2005, which led to Sri Lanka being the first in South Asia to issue mobile payment licenses. And there is a lot of discussion about making that payment cycle more effective. And hopefully with the exchange control regime being changed, we may have PayPal coming in. Many people ask when is PayPal coming? PayPal is not coming because our exchange control regulations are archaic and absolutely dysfunctional, in my opinion, right? And that is due to be changed, which is a positive development. And with that, hopefully, a free flow, inflow, outflow regime will happen, maybe monitored. The mechanisms are being discussed. And with that, hopefully, PayPal will be on board, enabling PayPal account holders to remit their money using a corresponding bank in Sri Lanka. On the fourth right, which I thought is important for us to be effective users of digital media, is the right to be protected. Are we safe on the internet? And I think this theme was all about internet safety this time in the IGF conference. On that, I think we have seen Sri Lanka having a fairly vibrant computer crimes legal regime. We were the first in South Asia, the second country after Japan, to ratify the Budapest Cybercrime Treaty. And with that, what is important is the ability of our criminal justice authorities, law enforcement, police, judges to obtain electronic evidence from foreign service providers. And the last 2-3 days, we were quite disturbed by the worldwide trend, ransomware, the WannaCry malware, the ransomware that was kind of blocking many computers and systems globally. We had 1 or 2 incidents affecting 2 government agencies in Sri Lanka, which was managed to be, which we managed to use a kill switch and overcome. But what is important is that in those incidents, there is a need for international cooperation and collaboration between not just CERTs and those who are involved in mitigating threats, but also need for collaboration between law enforcement agencies and private sector entities. And that framework is important, and the Budapest Convention provides that platform, and Sri Lanka is a party to it. And a best example, if you are wanting to search online of effective implementation of that, is how the malware engineers who led the spy eye operation for many years were eventually apprehended in two different countries. One at the Swarnabhumi International Airport in Thailand, and the second one was redirected while he was leaving the Bahamas on a holiday. He was trying to go via Cuba, but he was redirected. His ticket got cancelled and redirected via Atlanta International Airport and apprehended. And that was an example of 26 international law enforcement agencies working together collaboratively with private sector entities to go after the chain of electronic evidence using the Budapest Convention as an effective tool. So that leads to certain rights, the right to be protected and to be in a safer environment where we can use the internet effectively. Last of all, Professor Rohan did a very nice snapshot about multi-stakeholderism. I fully agree with that entirely. The only point I want to add in terms of examples for us to look at, ICANN is an interesting model, a best practice model in my opinion, Internet Cooperation for Assigned Names and Numbers, represented here by our colleague from the regional office. And it's an example because they managed the IANA transition effectively. So the IANA transition from NTIA to the global internet community, and there's a lot of talk about it. But don't forget the multi-stakeholderism that happened a little over a decade ago in Sri Lanka. And that is the last thing I just want to leave as a thought for you. Sri Lanka has often given a route to best practices, like best practices in regulation during the time of Professor Rohan Samarajiva, of course, not after that. But then we have best practices in terms of multi-stakeholderism. And I'll give an example of what happened when the .lk registry, which was within the administrative control of Syntech, had to be transitioned to a different model. And we had Syntech moving out, and a new entity at that time, 2003, it is no longer new. ICTA was established, and we had a very vibrant board, a very visionary board, led by a gentleman, a banker who's now a parliamentarian. And of course, we also had Professor Rohan in the board. They all decided, let's give that out as a public resource and create a multi-stakeholder model out of it. And that's what led to the LK registry being formed as a not-for-profit guarantee company. First time it happened in South Asia. And the board is representative of the internet community, the telecom regulator, the ISP associations, and of course ICTA and other user communities. Maybe the board has to be broad-based, and maybe the membership needs to be broad-based. But I think it's an interesting example of a living example of a multi-stakeholder model rooted in Sri Lanka. So I think on an encouraging note, I would like to encourage a new generation to think positively that Sri Lanka has often given birth to best practices and norms. It's up to you guys and girls to take it forward. Thank you.
So it's really happy to hear that we have been in the multi-stakeholderism approach we used by 2 decades ago. So 1 decade ago. So Kelvin Wong from ICANN will explain. Last 2 days he explained almost the IG ecosystem of ICANN. So he will be here and he will do some statement on multi-stakeholderism in Sri Lanka as he's been witness for the last 2 days.
Okay, I'm not gonna make excuse me. a statement, and I'm not going to go through the multi-stakeholder model because I know you guys for the last 2 days, and we've been through all of this. And the gentlemen on this table need no introduction to multi-stakeholderism anymore. But I'd like to point to Jayantha's. Well, I'd like to thank him for giving me this segue to explain a bit more about ICANN's model of this multi-stakeholder model. I'm just going to be quite brief because what some of you did yesterday, thanks to Mahi, was to have a sort of a simple role play on the multi-stakeholder model where you broke into different groups and you talked about let me try to get this right. Coming out with some solutions on the waste dump issue that happened, I think, in Sri Lanka some time ago. That was a good example. The ICANN example, it's a little bit more complicated because we have very diverse stakeholders, and I think Prof. Gihan already mentioned that some of these actors may have overlapping interests, or they may not. They have very diverse interests, but we work together for a common purpose in a bottom-up approach. So ICANN's model is really to break them into very defined structures. I'm not going to go into the details because they may confuse you if you've not been confused the last 2 days. It's really into a very defined structures on specific stakeholders groups, such as the technical community, the civil society, end users, and academia, technical groups. So they are very defined in terms of the role that they play. And we have supporting organizations, we have advisory committees. Some of these, as I mentioned to you, could initiate the policy process. Some advises the board. So there are clear structure in the ICANN system, the ICANN multi-stakeholder model to push through a particular proposal. Now, I wanted to also answer the I think Professor Rohan's comment earlier that some people are able to have a loud voice and some people are able to make the comment because somebody paid their airfare to come to the table, and which is why you can speak. I think it's a fair comment, and it's something that we are mindful of, which is why as another sort of a best practice, and I say this humbly, if you may, one of the things that we try to do is really to rotate the meetings in different regions and in different countries, and we're not even always in a capital. It could be in so the last meeting that was in Asia was in India, but it wasn't in Delhi. It was in Hyderabad. Well, for good reasons. Hyderabad is the city to be in as well. But as you can see, we go to different regions and we go to different areas so that locals can participate in the meetings, and you know that the meetings are free. And we also offer the fellowships so that people from more underserved regions could come and attend the meeting. And that's something that we do. If you haven't known, I know this panel is very clear about what ICANN does, but just to share with everyone, this is what we do to make sure that there is diversity and that we are able to bring as many different people in the room as possible. And if you recently has been to an ICANN meeting, we have a public forum where people can just queue up in front of the mic to speak. You will realize that a lot of them are newcomers coming to the first time attending meeting from far-flung fetches on a fellowship that otherwise they would not have been able to make it and speak and ask questions directly to a board member in ICANN or management in ICANN. So this is, if I may, again, it's like a best practice. I also wanted to share, maybe indulge me, one more sort of example of a best practice. I know, Jayantha mentioned good things about the multi-stakeholder model. You guys trailblazed the way as well in Sri Lanka. But my observation as well in other countries that I would like to bring to the table here is also how some countries have organized themselves to come together and share updates. So, for example, not everybody here will have the chance, quite frankly, to go to an ICANN meeting. Of course, you could participate remotely, but if it's in a faraway place, the last meeting was in Copenhagen. I mean, far away in terms of geography. So it's not easy for you to be attending that. So in the Japanese context, just indulge me in this. The Japanese have brought it upon themselves to actually have people go to the meeting, they come back, and then they share with the wider community in the local language. I thought it was a marvelous idea, and they've been doing this for. So this is the ICANN 58. They have been doing it for 48 times. So they started from the 10th ICANN meeting, I think, which is why it's their readout. We call it a readout or debriefing session for 48 times. And I tried to attend as well to give our take, ICANN's take as well. I speak a little bit of Japanese. So my point is that what they do is really something very interesting, where they bring what they learn in ICANN, localize it for the local community so that it doesn't overwhelm the community, but I tell you what is relevant for the community in the local language. And they will get feedback from there. And where appropriate, they'll just bring it back to the table in ICANN. So this is something that I try to share as I go around a best practice model. It doesn't have to be an ICANN meeting. It could be IGF. It could be IGF. So I saw you could. It's something it could be IGF where we have reps to go there, come back and share the readout of the meeting in the local language, collate feedback, send it back to somewhere where it makes sense and where there's some follow-up. So I will stop here. I just wanted to build on the best practice part and to share a bit of what I have experienced in other countries.
So actually, we are running out of time. So now we are going to end this session. If there you have to add something, so it's time.
I'd like to register some reservations. The European model of privacy and the right to be forgotten are seriously problematic. Actually, common law countries, I happen to be a lawyer as well, and I deal with these matters on a daily basis, on a regular basis. I'm on the UN Global Pulse, which is the entity that deals with big data issues. I'm on their advisory committee. And there is an issue where the European model of privacy, where any database, for example, of the people who came here, all their information would have to be registered, and you'd be a data controller, and you'd have to register all this with the Data Protection Authority. And there'll be all kinds of restrictions on that. It's a very archaic and cumbersome and bureaucratic model. And the general tendency in common law countries, which Sri Lanka is for the most part, is to take real problems and address real problems rather than work from general principles like in civil law countries in Europe. So, for example, one of the biggest problems that we have for privacy, if you think about personal data, because nobody knows what privacy is anyway. Privacy is an undefined concept. I have written many journal articles, and I've had students who have written dissertations on privacy, and it's a amorphous concept. The issue is that that one of the real harms to personally identifiable information that can cause real damage to people is the theft of data that is kept somewhere else, breaches of data. Now, this European concept does not address that. While the tort law and the common law approach, we can actually address real harms without addressing imagined harms. So I think we have to be very, very cautious about importing the very cumbersome and bureaucratic European model of privacy protection to our country. The right to be forgotten, in my view, contradicts completely the right to expression. That is, any politician can go and say, what I did 15 years ago, and you know that many of our politicians have done bad things 15 years ago, they can take those things not off the web, but off all the search engines. Now, I personally don't understand how these decisions can be balanced, either by Google. Actually, Google is the one who's balancing this. Is that a justified request or not? That is what the European model has evolved to. So I think we need to be very cautious about importing other people's conceptions of rights to our country. So I'd like to make that reservation. And I think this is the last kind of thing that we need in our constitution, including, as I said, I'm opposed to having a right to the internet also in our constitution. You're moderating. Can I add? No, actually, I wholeheartedly agree with Professor Samarajiva on his statement on privacy. Often, in fact, that's the only subject you would have noted I didn't address in the rights that suite of rights I was thinking about today. And I was thinking of addressing privacy, but I did not. And I left Dr. Rasika did a good job with it. I agree wholeheartedly with Professor Rohan. Often when we talk about legal regimes in our country, we are reminded that we have all these various laws in place, but where is our data protection law? Where is our privacy law? And I keep wondering, where do rights to privacy begin and where does it end? And there are this notion of European data protection regime is extremely difficult to implement in a country like Sri Lanka, purely for the reason it's a common law country. And I just want to remind ourselves that we already have certain statutory frameworks in place which sectorally governs protection of data, and basically these are measures to prevent data breaches from happening. So for example, the Banking Act has got an extremely mature framework with regard to protection of customer information and how it should be managed. Then we have series of other laws, including Intellectual Property Act in section 160, talking about rights of persons in relation to information shared in a confidential environment, both within an employer-employee relationship or otherwise. And then we have the latest law, which nobody took very much note of, the Registration of Persons Amendment Act number 6 of 2016, where the protection was given to biometric data collected for the ENIC initiative, National ID Card Initiative, and certain rights and duties were imposed. The rights that the citizens would have, and the duties imposed on the Commissioner General of Registration of Persons Office has been described in that law, and that's worthy to take a look at and see whether it is working or not. And I'm also not too sure whether we have an adequate framework to have a data protection commissioner put into place in this country. So I just want to put all these thoughts up in the air and ask that we have a broader, mature discussion on privacy
and how we should manage it before we implement a regime from whatever model that is available internationally. Thank you.
I'd quote Professor Rohan back to Professor Rohan. I guess maybe we need to have the discussion of it in the ideological level, not the IGF level. Maybe we don't use the word privacy. Maybe there's other words for it, but I wouldn't presume to walk into someone's house without permission, or I wouldn't presume to ask people personal questions about their lifestyle or things like that, or what's going on in their head. So, but I'll leave it at that, I guess.
But you come from the United States. Do you have a right to privacy? In the United States, do you have a right to privacy? You have data protection laws that are cutting across all sectors? You don't.
We have a constitutional, we have a Fourth
It has been
Amendment
interpreted.
right against search and seizure.
It has been interpreted, yes, but you don't have European type data protection laws. I didn't say anything about protection of personally identifiable information. I said we don't need the European model. The United States does not accept that cross-cutting concept of privacy. You have sectoral, you have privacy for educational records. You have privacy for video records. You have privacy for health information, right? Those are your laws. Sectoral, you are built on a foundation of common law. I would invite you to read Daniel Solov and all these people, right? I have been teaching privacy law in the United States. I'm not against privacy. I'm just against this importation of European models and imposing it on a country where it is completely inappropriate.
I am too.
So with this heated discussion, so we are going to end the session. And this this is the end of the Internet Governance Forum, third topic. And we have one more session. It's award ceremony for School of Internet Governance students. So it will be starting by another 10 minutes. So you can have refreshed and back to this room. So award ceremony will be taking place. Thank you very much. And thank you for all the panelists for the whole 3 days who participated and who had done the engagement and participated for this grand event. Thank you very much.